There's a sound we all know too well, the splash of warm water, the clink of porcelain, the rhythm of a sponge circling the base of a bowl. Most of us move through it thoughtlessly. It's just a habit, a cleanup, a tick on the domestic to-do list. But in classical Feng Shui, water is never just water. It is wealth in motion. And your kitchen sink is not just a sink, it's a portal, a stream, a signal. The way you engage with water here, especially at certain hours, can either gently call abundance towards you or unknowingly carry it away. Now pause and think for a moment. When was the last time you washed dishes? Was it late at night when the house had fallen quiet and you finally had a moment to yourself? Was it before sunrise, when sleep escaped you and the weight of the day began too early? Or was it hurried, squeezed between tasks, unthinking and purely mechanical? In Feng Shui, water is the breath of qi, and the flow of that breath must align with the rhythms of nature. When water is moved with harmony, it nourishes. When it is disturbed at the wrong time, it leaks. Imagine your home as a living body, its entrance like a mouth, its stove like a heart, and the sink as its lungs. What happens when we breathe too fast, too shallow, too erratically? The entire system falters. The same applies to your home. Every object, every flow, every pause matters, and so does timing, and especially when it comes to water. That's why today we're going to explore a surprisingly overlooked question. Can the simple act of dishwashing influence your financial energy? According to generations of classical Feng Shui practitioners, the answer is yes, but not because water is magical, because your timing is a mirror of your alignment. Your choices ripple through space, and water is the element that carries that ripple furthest. In this video, we'll uncover the 3 most energetically harmful time windows for washing dishes. Times when water movement can disturb the balance in your home and even subtly sabotage your financial rhythm. Then we'll explore the 3 most supportive periods of the day, when washing becomes not just cleansing, but also fortifying, amplifying your home's ability to retain and invite fortune. But this is not about superstition. It's about rhythm. Just as a farmer plants by the season, and a sailor moves with the tides, Feng Shui teaches us to cooperate with time, not override it. We'll also look at a real-life story of a man who unknowingly sabotaged his energetic field by cleaning his kitchen at exactly the wrong time, and what changed when he shifted his rhythm by just an hour. The difference wasn't just outer, it was internal. And that's what Feng Shui aims for. Quiet alignment that strengthens the core of your space in the way you move through it. By the end of this episode, I promise you'll never look at your kitchen sink the same way again. You'll begin to notice patterns, moments where fortune felt stalled, conversations that fell into tension after late night cleaning, and perhaps even the fatigue that lingers after tasks performed out of rhythm. And most importantly, you'll have tools, not theories, to begin restoring balance, right from your own countertop. So if your intuition is already whispering that there's more to daily chores than meets the eye, you're in the right place. This video is for those who believe that every act in the home is a vote for harmony or for friction, and that even the smallest decisions, when made with intention, can redirect the entire current of a household. Before we continue, I have a small favor to ask. If this kind of content, gentle, practical, energetically aware, is something you value, please consider giving this video a like, sharing it with someone whose home energy could use a quiet shift, and subscribing to this channel, New Day Mindfulness. My goal is to reach 1,000 subscribers so I can continue producing high-quality, grounded Feng Shui teachings for people who want real change. Not superstition, not drama, but subtle realignment that flows with life. Your support means more than numbers. It allows me to grow this circle of quiet seekers who want their home to speak a better language, one of ease, protection, and prosperity. Every comment, every story you share becomes part of this community's energetic field, and I'm deeply grateful to have you here. Now take a breath, look toward your kitchen. Let your mind remember the last time the water ran through your hands, and ask yourself, not with judgment, but with curiosity, was that water nourishing your space or washing something precious away? Why timing matters. In classical Feng Shui, water is not a background element. It is one of the 5 core forces that govern the balance of life, alongside wood, fire, earth, and metal. Of all these, water is the most symbolic of movement, wealth, and adaptability. It flows where it is welcomed and stagnates where it is ignored. But contrary to modern misinterpretations, not all flowing water brings fortune. That depends entirely on its timing, direction, and placement. Water is the most generous when guided by natural cycles, and the most disruptive when moved carelessly. This is especially true inside the home. The kitchen sink, often dismissed as a purely utilitarian fixture, actually functions as what traditional Feng Shui masters call a minor mouth of water. While not as energetically influential as the front door, it still governs a vital internal channel of movement, especially related to nourishment, daily rhythm, and resource management. In Feng Shui, the kitchen is the metabolic engine of the home, and the sink, by association, serves as its energetic drain and detoxifier. The timing of water activity at the sink is therefore not trivial. It can either harmonize the space or create unseen leaks in your energetic architecture. Think of it this way: just as digestion needs a rhythm, so does energy. Imagine forcing your body to digest a heavy meal at 2 a.m. It can be done, but the effect will likely be discomfort, sluggishness, or imbalance. The same principle applies to how and when water is moved through your kitchen. When we activate the sink during stable energetic windows, like mid-morning or late afternoon, the water helps clear residue and opens flow. But when we do so during transitional or imbalanced hours, such as late night or early morning, we inadvertently send a signal of disturbance through the home. The ancient masters often said, when water flows during a time of withdrawal, it takes more than it gives. This is not poetic metaphor. It is a technical observation based on how qi behaves in relationship to yin and yang cycles. Yang hours are expansive and outward focused, ideal for action and movement. Yin hours are inward, cooling, and restorative, best suited for reflection and stillness. Washing dishes at 10 p.m. may seem productive, but energetically, it creates friction with the natural withdrawal of qi. It stirs the field at the exact moment it seeks to settle. This is why some households, despite having impeccable cleanliness and organization, still report feeling blocked, fatigued, or energetically heavy. The issue is not the action, it is its timing. Misaligned rhythms, even when filled with good intention, carry an unseen cost. This principle of energetic timing is the foundation upon which more complex Feng Shui analysis is built. Water is not judged by its presence, but by its context. A fountain placed correctly brings wealth. The same fountain placed next to the bathroom door may create leakage. A kitchen sink scrubbed at 7 a.m. can energize a family. The same sink scrubbed at 3 a.m. might leave its members groggy and irritable for days without knowing why. Timing matters, not because Feng Shui wants to impose rules, but because life at its core is rhythm. And when we align with rhythm, even our most mundane acts become harmonized with the greater field of prosperity. The 3 mistimed windows that redirect prosperity. Number 1, 9:00 to 11:00 p.m. The night pulse transfer between 9:00 and 9:00 p.m. Something subtle but significant happens in the energy field of the home. The house itself begins to exhale. This time window is not just about sleep, it is about transition. In traditional Feng Shui, these hours mark the passage from yang activity into full yin stillness. The qi that once animated movement, conversation, and engagement during the day begins to retreat toward the center. This is the pulse transfer, the gentle recalibration that sets the energetic tone for how well the body will rest, how clearly the mind will reset, and how open the spirit will be to renewal. But when water is activated during this window, especially in the form of dishwashing, where heat, noise, and friction collide, we unknowingly interfere with this natural descent into stillness. The energy field that was meant to settle begins to ripple, and just like tossing a stone into a calm pond before it freezes, that disturbance lingers longer than we realize. Feng Shui teachings describe this as disrupting the stabilization qi, the anchoring force that prepares the home and its inhabitants for a deep reset. Without that anchoring, thoughts scatter more easily, decisions feel delayed or blurred, and the sleep cycle weakens. One might not immediately trace these effects to a late sink rinse or a few plates cleaned before bed, but over time, this small habit compounds. Energetic leaks don't always look dramatic. They often express themselves as fatigue that doesn't go away, productivity that plateaus, or an eerie sense that things just aren't quite flowing. The logic here isn't mystical, it's ecological. At night, the entire environment is recalibrating. Nature cools, animals quiet, light recedes. Even the temperature of the walls shifts. The qi within a home wants to mimic that descent, so that when morning comes, it can rise with strength. But too much movement during yin hours reverses the yang buildup. Think of it like driving a car downhill while pressing the accelerator. You lose control. The wheel doesn't turn cleanly. The road doesn't respond the same. The water in your sink, when activated during this night window, acts the same way. It flows not with clarity, but with resistance. And when resistance meets water, wealth escapes in ways too subtle for the eye, but too consistent to ignore. This is why many Feng Shui practitioners advise against any water-related activity during this time, not because of superstition, but because of alignment. If the home is a vessel, then this window is its time to seal. Any disruption to that sealing weakens the container. And what good is fortune if it slips through the cracks you never meant to open? Number 2, 3 hours, 5 a.m., peak yin, the deep inhale. From 3 to 5 a.m., the home enters its most yin state, a period known in classical Feng Shui as the deep inhale of the house's energy field. This is not just a time of rest. It is a sacred pause between the end of night and the approach of light. The environment is utterly still. Streets are quiet, human activity ceases, and the atmosphere thickens with stillness. Nature at this hour is not passive, it is drawing breath. This is when qi pulls inward, condenses, and realigns. The walls of the home begin to exude their stored frequency. The bedding holds the imprint of dreams. The air turns dense with unspoken memory. And in this moment, activating water, even briefly, can confuse the spatial field. Feng Shui teaches that water governs motion and mental clarity, but here, that motion becomes misaligned. It's like opening a door in the middle of meditation. It fragments the cohesion. When water is run during this hour, especially in a kitchen or bathroom, it disrupts the pattern of retreat. The space which was beginning to crystallize into coherence instead becomes jumbled. This may seem abstract, but the symptoms are very real. Households where early morning water rituals are common, especially those done under pressure or anxiety, often report low energetic stamina during the day. Projects stall, goals feel scattered. Money comes in, but it disappears just as fast. There is no clarity, only effort. And effort, in a space where qi has been confused, breeds only exhaustion. You may notice that in homes where people frequently wake before dawn to do dishes, handle kitchen prep, or flush drains, the family often struggles to find cohesion in decision-making. Long-term plans get abandoned. Financial conversations end in frustration. Relationships lose their sense of shared direction. This isn't coincidence, it's energetic mismatch. Just as we wouldn't ask a seed to sprout in midwinter, we should not ask water to activate during the moment the house is meant to digest silence. The chi field cannot organize itself properly when movement interrupts consolidation. And water, as a carrier of signals, sends messages to every corner of the house. The message sent at 4:00 a.m. through noise, heat, and activity is one of disruption. The house interprets this not as wakefulness, but as alarm. Over time, this pattern produces chronic instability, not just in wealth, but in the clarity of goals, the emotional glue that holds relationships, and the sense of direction that allows families to move forward together. Feng Shui doesn't warn against early water usage because of myth. It cautions because of rhythm. There is a time to flow, and there is a time to hold stillness like a prayer. Between 3:00 and 5:00 a.m., the house is not asking for cleansing, it is asking for rest. And when we give it that rest, we allow the invisible architecture of fortune to rise on a foundation that is whole. Number 3, 5:45, 6:30 p.m., the daily handover. Between 5:45 and 6:30 in the evening, the energetic atmosphere of the home undergoes a subtle but powerful shift. This window is not quite day, not quite night. It exists at the intersection where yang energy, which has been in motion since sunrise, begins to yield to the calming descent of yin. Feng Shui recognizes this handover as one of the most delicate thresholds in the entire 24-hour cycle. It's not only a shift in light or temperature, it is a shift in emotional rhythm, relational tone, and environmental sensitivity. In many cultures, this is the time when families reunite, meals begin to simmer, lights are dimmed, and the house transitions from outward action to inward reflection. But when this window is interrupted by unnecessary water movement, particularly the noise and activity of dishwashing, the energetic communication in the home gets scrambled. Water at this time, which should be held still to mirror the body's natural deceleration, is instead stirred into unnecessary friction. The house, sensing this contradiction, interprets it as confusion, and this confusion often takes root not in the walls, but in the people. Conversations begun during or shortly after dishwashing in this hour tend to carry an edge. Misunderstandings rise more easily. Tension simmers, even when the topic is benign. Children may become more irritable, partners more reactive, meals eaten in the presence of clanging water, and rushing cleanup often feel rushed rather than nourishing. It is not that the water itself is wrong, but its timing contradicts the house's need to soften. In this shoulder hour, when both light and energy lean inward, water must be used with respect, if at all. Ideally, dishwashing should conclude before this window opens, or wait until the household has settled fully into the yin period after 7:00 p.m. Think of the home at this hour as a gathering field. Everything you've carried from them emotionally, energetically, mentally is arriving home with you. The chi wants to reorganize, to embrace, to reconnect. When water is activated here, it doesn't just rinse plates, it dilutes intimacy, and this dilution compounds over time. Feng Shui reminds us that harmony is not just about layout or color, but rhythm. To support that rhythm, water must flow at the right time, in the right tone, with the right intention. In this twilight passage between yang and yin, the most generous act is not another chore. It is a pause. Let the light soften. Let the silence grow. Let the home receive the day without interruption. In that stillness, the field resets. And in that reset, the luck of the house is not just preserved, it is refined. One family's small shift. In an interview not widely circulated outside Asia, actress Michelle Yeoh once spoke candidly about how she copes with mental clutter during high-pressure filming seasons. She shared that for years, she had a small habit of unwinding after midnight by cleaning, especially washing dishes, long after her staff had gone home. It wasn't about cleanliness, it was a kind of release. After hours of scripts, lights, and expectations, the simple sound of running water gave her a sense of control. But over time, she noticed something subtle. Sleep became more difficult, even on quiet days. She woke feeling a step behind despite early nights. And her home, though beautiful, began to feel heavy, as if it were holding on to something unspoken. A Buddhist-leaning Feng Shui consultant who visited her home for an unrelated reason casually mentioned one line that changed everything. Late-night water flows don't clean, they leak. That sentence stayed with her. Instead of resisting, she decided to experiment. For 1 week, she moved her dishwashing and water routines to early morning, around 6:30 a.m., while sunlight gently entered the space. She also began a small act that became symbolic. After rinsing the last plate, she would dry the sink completely, wipe the edges, and take one breath with her hand on the faucet, silently saying, "May what is clear remain clear." Within days, the shift was unmistakable. She felt more rested. Her dreams softened. Her calls and correspondence felt less reactive, more fluid. 2 film deals that had been paused due to contract revisions suddenly moved forward without her prompting. She didn't attribute it to magic. She called it timing, alignment. And perhaps most profoundly, she admitted, it wasn't about the dishes. It was about not stirring water when the house needed silence. That story, quiet and unassuming, reminds us that even someone with global recognition, wealth, and staff still meets the home with their own hands. Energy doesn't care about fame, it listens to rhythm. And when the rhythm is right, everything else can follow. The 3 supportive windows for energy circulation. Number 1, 6:30, 8 a.m. Energetic activation. Between 6:30 and 8 in the morning, the home enters one of its most dynamic, energetic phases. A window where yang energy rises with clarity, purpose, and momentum. In Feng Shui, this period is associated with activation, not just of physical space, but of mental clarity and direction. It is when the day's qi is still malleable, not yet pulled in competing directions. The body is alert but not rushed, and the home, if aligned, mirrors this readiness. Dishwashing during this window, when done with intention, becomes more than just a task. It becomes an energetic message to the environment that says, I am clearing space for movement. There is something profoundly activating about moving water in the morning, especially when the air is still cool and light spills into the kitchen in quiet gradients. The very act of cleaning dishes, often associated with closure, here takes on the quality of preparation. You are not erasing the past, you are clarifying the present. This distinction matters deeply. Many ancient Feng Shui masters advised early water use specifically because it signaled a willingness to face the day with openness and in order. But timing alone is not enough. Placement matters too. During morning dishwashing, it is especially beneficial to let fresh air enter the space, even for a few minutes. An open window, a cracked door, a gentle cross draft, all of these invite wealth qi to circulate. Without air movement, water stagnates, and so does intention. But when moving water meets fresh air, the qi responds dynamically, as if it has been given permission to travel. This is when financial clarity often strengthens, not only in form of income, but in how decisions are made, how time is managed, how clutter is perceived. People who routinely wash dishes between 6:30 and 8 a.m. often report that the rest of the day flows with more structure. Tasks feel more manageable. Conversations feel more precise. Plans unfold with fewer friction points. This isn't coincidence, it's entrainment. The house, when started with rhythm, sets a tone. Water movement here is not just cleansing, it's directive. And that direction feeds the rest of the day. The energetic logic is simple. Begin clean, begin still, begin clear. Let the water move where the light meets air. Let the body move in tune with that flow, and let the mind follow, not in chaos, but in calm momentum that carries you toward results. Number 2, 3 o'clock to 5 p.m. Centered flow. Between 3 o'clock and 5 p.m., the chi of the day enters a state of centered flow. A space between the intensity of midday activity and the slow descent toward evening calm. In Feng Shui, this window holds a uniquely balanced energetic frequency. The heat of the sun has passed its peak, but its light remains generous and supportive. The mind, slightly tired from the day's demands, becomes more receptive to clarity than stimulation. In this window, washing dishes or running water becomes a perfect act of gentle cleansing, not forceful, not disruptive, but recalibrating. Energetically, this is the ideal time to release minor stagnation without triggering energetic collapse. Unlike the delicate tension found in early evening or the deep stillness of night, this mid-afternoon period accommodates motion well, especially motion accompanied by awareness. In fact, this is one of the few times when water can be moved through the home without risk of disturbing its energetic rhythm. But to maximize the effect, the role of natural light cannot be overstated. Whenever possible, dishwashing during this time should take place in an environment where natural sunlight filters in, either directly through a window or gently reflected off nearby surfaces. The combination of light and water in Feng Shui symbolizes clarity of purpose and openness of vision. It's why ancient homes often place water features near open courtyards and why temples align sacred washing vessels beneath skylights. When light touches water, it doesn't just brighten the room. It refracts intention. In practical terms, households that engage in late afternoon cleansing rituals tend to experience subtle benefits: increased cohesion among family members, better digestion during dinner, and more ease in winding down later in the evening. There's a reason many successful professionals instinctively pause around this hour, not necessarily for productivity, but to breathe, to walk, to recalibrate. Likewise, the home benefits from this same rhythm. Dishwashing becomes a small ritual of reflection. It clears the residue of early day intensity and resets the space for the softness of evening. This is especially important in homes where multiple people cross paths after work or school, bringing different energies, emotions, and mental states. The act of running water with sunlight present acts as a harmonizer, a quiet adjustment that tells the space, we are releasing the noise of the day so that we may receive one another more openly. In this way, 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock p.m. becomes not just a practical time to clean, but an invisible anchor that steadies the household before it begins its transition into yin. The more consciously we align with that, the more our environment flows with us rather than against us. Number 3, before 8 o'clock p.m. gentle close between 7 o'clock and 8 p.m., the home begins to settle into its deeper yin phase, a period when the external drive of the day yields fully to internal restoration. This is the hour of integration. Feng Shui considers this time especially potent, not for initiating movement, but for completing it with softness and clarity. It is not a time for rushing, scraping, or loud splashes, but rather a time for tending gently to the final motions of the day. If dishes remain in the sink, or if light clutter lingers, this is the final hour where energy can be moved without disturbing the household's underlying equilibrium. When dishwashing is done before 8 p.m., the action helps consolidate the qi flow, bringing closure to the cycle of daily nourishment. The kitchen in Feng Shui is not just where food is prepared, it is where abundance is metabolized. Cleaning this area during this time if done with presence and without agitation, allows any lingering energetic residue from meals, interactions, or emotional exchanges to be quietly released. But there is a significant difference between functional cleaning and mindful closing. The most beneficial approach during this window involves using a soft light source, such as a warm lamp, pendant bulb, or even candlelight if it feels grounding. Avoid overhead fluorescent lights or anything that adds sharpness to the space. Let the lighting match the tone of the task. Quiet, resolving, non-demanding. As you clean, focus not just on removing debris, but on restoring texture. The goal is not just visual order, but energetic reset. Wiping down countertops slowly, drying the sink thoroughly, and placing items back where they belong becomes a subtle but powerful ritual. In this hour, such acts say to the house, "We are complete for today." This message allows the household chi to begin its descent into stillness. When done regularly, even just a few times a week, this ritual becomes deeply stabilizing. Homes that observe a gentle closing practice tend to report more restful sleep, fewer nighttime arguments, and improved digestion. Not only physically, but emotionally. It becomes easier to let go of the day because the home has modeled how to do it. Like a child watching an adult's behavior, the body often imitates the home's energy. If the home is cleaned in haste and noise, the nervous system remains alert. But if the final cleaning is done in calm, the body receives permission to soften. This also reinforces an important Feng Shui principle that clarity attracts abundance. Clarity in space, clarity in rhythm, clarity in closure. By completing your dishwashing before 8 p.m. and pairing it with soft light and slow gestures, you invite your environment to become an ally in restoring balance. And when the home becomes your ally, fortune doesn't need to be chased. It comes and settles quietly where it feels respected. Kitchen as the home's wealth alchemist. In traditional Feng Shui, the kitchen holds an unmatched significance as the energetic crucible where nourishment, prosperity, and protection are synthesized into lived experience. It is not merely the place where meals are prepared. It is the silent alchemist of the household, transmuting raw energy into vitality. Within this domain, the two most potent forces, fire and water, coexist in delicate proximity. The stove, representing the element of fire, governs our outward wealth, how we express, produce, and manifest energy into tangible gain. A well-maintained, frequently used stove reflects an active fire chi, one that supports ambition, decision-making, and visible success in the outer world. Meanwhile, the sink embodies water, the internal flow that governs emotional rhythm, receptivity, and financial liquidity. This inward current ensures that what comes in can be received, stored, and circulated with grace. When the relationship between fire and water becomes unbalanced, when one dominates or depletes the other, the household begins to suffer either financially, relationally, or both. This imbalance doesn't require catastrophe to appear. Often it shows up quietly: missed opportunities, delayed income, a feeling of effort without yield, or repeated arguments that loop without resolution. For example, in homes where the stove and sink sit directly next to each other without any separation, friction builds in the energetic field. The fire energy, instead of radiating outward, becomes suppressed by the cooling, dissolving presence of water. Conversely, if the water becomes overactive, perhaps through a dripping faucet or excessive use during yin hours, it can douse the fire's momentum, leading to a gradual stagnation in ambition or financial drive. The solution is both physical and symbolic. Whenever possible, the stove and sink should be separated by a neutral material, ideally a wooden or stone divider. Wood, as the harmonizer in the 5-element cycle, naturally mediates between fire and water, providing a soft buffer that prevents their energies from clashing directly. Stone, though inert, grounds both elements and offers stability. Even a simple wooden cutting board placed between the two stations can redirect the energetic tension, giving each element the space to operate independently while still supporting the whole. But beyond the physical layout, how one uses these areas matters equally. Cooking with attention, cleaning with presence, and arranging these stations with care will signal to the environment that its energetic field is being honored. This care, in turn, reflects back as fortune. It is not superstition, it is symmetry. When the home sees you managing opposing forces with grace, it aligns accordingly. The kitchen becomes not just a site of function, but a field of quiet transformation. Fire feeds action. Water supports receptivity. Together, when respected and well separated, they sustain the household's ability to grow, adapt, and thrive. In this way, every pot you stir and every dish you wash becomes part of a much larger ritual, one that tells your home and your life that abundance is not an accident. It is a practice performed daily in the space where heat meets reflection and flow meets flame. When we talk about Feng Shui, many people picture furniture placement or lucky charms, but those are just surface reflections. Beneath all of it lies a deeper principle: rhythm. Not superstition, not performance, rhythm. In the same way a tree bends when the wind changes direction, or a tide recedes before it returns stronger, energy in your home responds to timing. And timing in this tradition is not a matter of the clock, it's a declaration. The hour you choose to move water, to clear a surface, to close the kitchen for the night, these are not random actions. They are quiet conversations with your space. When done with awareness, they carry intention, and intention becomes energy. So when you wash dishes at 6:30 a.m. instead of 10 p.m., you're not just shifting your schedule, you're aligning your environment with the natural pulse of abundance. You are choosing to clear not out of exhaustion, but out of readiness. You are telling your home, I make space to receive. And when you do that enough times, the space starts to believe you. You might notice that sleep becomes easier, conversations flow more kindly, and that sense of mental fog begins to lift. Not all at once, but gently, like mist rising with the morning light. This is not about becoming someone you're not. It's about reclaiming the rhythm your home already wants to hold. Try shifting your habit just once. Choose a window that aligns with nature's breath. Maybe it's the soft morning light between 6:30 and 8 o'clock. Maybe it's the centered stillness of mid-afternoon. Just try. Don't chase instant results. Observe instead what settles. Maybe your child eats more peacefully. Maybe your partner listens more. Maybe you finally sleep through the night without waking at 3 a.m. These aren't coincidences. They are responses, your home responding to your care. And if this video gave you even one quiet realization, one new way to see your kitchen, your sink, or your time, then I warmly invite you to like this video, share it with someone who values meaningful space, and subscribe to New Day Mindfulness. Your support helps me reach 1,000 followers, a milestone that allows me to offer more grounded, heart-centered content just like this. And in the comments, I would love to hear, what small shift are you ready to make in your home's rhythm? Maybe it's a time adjustment, maybe a different light, maybe simply wiping the sink dry with both hands in a breath. Your story, no matter how quiet, might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. Because this isn't about cleaning, it's about coherence. And that, dear friend, is how transformation begins. Not in thunder, but in timing.